Morning Joe is weighing in on the New York City's mayoral race in general and Andrew Yang's candidacy in particular, with particularly cringy results. Let's take a look at that.
We've got like the most important mayor's race in New York City probably in the last 50 years, maybe 100 years. I don't know. It's really important for a city that just keeps losing residents, keeps losing businesses. And I've seen polls, Andrew Yang's, I've seen him ahead in a lot of polls. I mean, you and I could do a better job running New York City than Andrew Yang. No offense, Andrew Yang. But this is a problem, isn't it? What's going on in that race?
Yeah, I love this city, Joe, and New York is in my blood. And some of my friends were all so concerned. New York is at a tipping point right now. If New York goes too hard left, and the city is doomed. As you said, if taxes continue to rise and it is no longer a place that makes sense for business and businesses are losing, we lose. New York still has to be in certain ways a top-down city.
There is so much going on here, and this segment went on for a while. First of all, let's marvel at Joe Scarborough and Donnie Deutsch being like, we could run this city way better than Andrew Yang. Looking down their nose like he's never accomplished anything. He's done plenty. And by the way, this lionizing of experience in local government, et cetera, look, you may believe that, you may not, but it's actually something that the public is clearly rejecting here in how much they're supporting Andrew Yang's campaign at this point. And then the other piece, Donnie Deutsch painting him like he's some far left guy. I actually really wish that was the case. I have some issues with how Andrew has run his campaign, in particular in New York City. He's not this far left guy. In fact, a lot of progressives are really upset with him about some of how he's positioned himself. He's being advised by some of Bloomberg's advisors here. So this idea that he's wildly to the left and it's going to destroy the city is just actually really silly.
He's hardly far left. I mean, I think people pin him as that because of the UBI that he's so famous for.
He's hard to peg. That's why they kind of see whatever they want to see or don't want to see in him. And he's got heterodox ideas across the spectrum. Again, some of those I like. I like the UBI idea. There are other pieces of it that I don't like as much. But to paint him as some far left ideologue is really silly.
It is. It's completely silly. And there's something Donnie Deutsch, I think, is really the perfect mascot for our idiotic and incompetent media class because he's so self-interested and so self-confident. But he says things that are so ill-informed. It's that weird, calling Andrew Yang far left. There's not really a good argument for that.
Let's remember, this is the guy who said that he might vote for Donald Trump if Bernie Sanders was the Democratic nominee. And this is someone also who, basically gets famous on Morning Joe every morning, bashing Donald Trump every day and saying how he's this unique threat to democracy. But then, God forbid, we have someone who supports, everybody having health care and a decent wage. We can't have that. We'd rather have the unique threat to democracy, I guess. So it gives you a little window into the brain of Donnie Deutsch.
Yes, it does. And it's just also about the establishment versus somebody who's against the establishment. Andrew Yang, it's, again, kind of funny to pin him as far left because he's sort of a business-minded guy, which is something, by the way, a lot of people, probably Joe Scarborough included, initially liked in Donald Trump. A lot of voters actually love this idea of bringing somebody in from the business community who can just shake up the establishment.
Yeah, and so kind of an annoying instinct of voters, but it is definitely there.
Yeah, totally. Especially if you talk to people, heard that a lot with Donald Trump, but that is there. It's especially there in New York City. And I think what they don't like about Andrew Yang at the end of the day is that he's against the establishment, is that he's an anti-establishment guy who's not going to come in and operate like an establishment guy. And I don't think their gripe with him is that he's far left so much as it is that he's anti-establishment.
Yeah, I love how they brand him that way and don't offer a scintilla of proof.
Right.
And I think you're exactly right. The real issue is that Andrew Yang does not owe Joe Scarborough or MSNBC or Donnie Deutsch anything. They are, Morning Joe is the classic, their whole innovation in the cable news sphere, which was kind of smart in a certain sense, was we're not going to get the highest ratings, but we're going to get this really coveted, insider crowd. We're going to make sure it's Morning Joe on the TV screens of everybody in every congressional office here. It's this, political insiders club.
Yes.
Morning show. Andrew Yang is not part of that club. And that's the real reason they hate him. It doesn't, and that's also the real reason they hated Bernie Sanders, by the way. It doesn't really have anything to do with his policy, even though they're sort of like ideologically committed to the Reagan era as well. The other Andrew Yang piece, yesterday I covered in my radar how the media's like lost their minds in covering this guy for exactly the same reason, because he doesn't owe them anything. He's not in their club. He doesn't have to go to them. He came up through in other ways and has this organic grassroots support behind him, and that drives them absolutely bananas. So this is the latest attack on him from Michelle Goldberg at the New York Times. Now the problem with him is that he's not a woman. It says there could never be a female Andrew Yang. And look, I don't want to downplay the sexism is real. I think women candidates face, having been one myself, I think women candidates do face some barriers that men don't face. But I also found it interesting reading through this op-ed, there was no commentary about how being an Asian American can also, you can face some double binds. You can face stereotypes. You know, the caricature of the Asian American man is like super smart, but not cut out for leadership, right? Not meant to get to those top levels. So Andrew has had to fight against his own sort of caricaturish stereotypes against his identity, something that liberals supposedly cared a lot about as we've had this wave of anti-Asian attacks. And that there's not a word about that in this piece whatsoever. So it just felt very strange and wildly incomplete.
Well, it's absolutely incontrovertibly true that sexism still exists and probably always will, but also that female candidates are treated differently. There's no question about it. But at the same time, this is such a good example to me, Michelle Goldberg of the New York Times, of sort of the media's navel-gazing, where they create problems that aren't necessarily existing. I mean, if we look at Cynthia Nixon's candidacy in New York, she did great, and it's not a one-to-one, obviously, it's not apples to apples, but come on, she has absolutely no reason to even be talking about this. There are a million other things she could be talking about, but instead she's treating her byline and her platform as the sort of intellectual plaything to pontificate about things that do not need to be pontificated on. There was absolutely no reason for this column to even exist.
Right, and so the initial approach with Yang in his presidential campaign is part of what I laid out on my radar yesterday. They just ignored him. And then, look, that was actually pretty effective because he couldn't break out from his young, enthusiastic base of support to do well as a presidential contender. Now that he's in the mayor's race and he's at the top of the field, they can't ignore him. So they first started with like what I would consider relatively reasonable questions or attacks. You know, like they're kind of bad faith, but it was like, why weren't you here during the pandemic? Okay, that's a fair question to ask. Why haven't you voted in mayor's race? Fair question to ask. None of those landed. So then they went to their stock and trade. He's alt-right. He's racist. He's sexist. He hangs out with, you know, people we find problematic. And to me, this is just an extension of that strategy to brand him himself as somehow problematic or bigoted for very unspecified reasons.
And I don't even think it's a conscious strategy from people like Michelle Goldberg. I just think it's how the echo chamber begets more of the echo chamber and perpetuates its own nonsense over and over again. So I think as soon as the strategy was sort of, you know, I guess rolled out by Democrats who are opposing Andrew Yang, the media dutifully picks up on it kind of uncritically and will just start rolling with it because it sounds like it's what they talked about at Barnard.
Yeah, this is what his opponents are planting with the media, and they're just like rolling with it, basically.
Totally agree.
Tomorrow in Rising, we got Max Alvarez, Henry Rogers. They'll be here for Team Rising. Friends Brianna Joy Gray and Stephanie Kelton are going to return. Remember to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of our videos. Don't forget to like and share as well. Emily is going to be back with us again tomorrow. Great to have you today, Emily.
Thanks for having me, Krystal.
You guys have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.